Hello, everybody. We'll start our webinar in a little while. We'll give people a few minutes to join, and then I'll start the introduction to this British Hydrological Society webinar. So, yeah, I won't say very much for a minute, but that's until we give people a minute or two. I'll just wait till it ticks over into 2 minutes past, and then we'll make a start because people are still joining. Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody and thank people for joining us for the British Hydrological Society Professional Development Month, which is what we're here for. And this is the third in our series of webinars, and we're delighted to have people with us today. My name's Joe Pierce. I'm the president of the British Hydrological Society, and I'm joined today by Emma Cross, who's chair of our British Hydrological Society Education and Careers Subcommittee, who've brought this event together for us. We're especially pleased to be joined today by the Institution of Civil Engineers as the focus of today's webinar. And I'd like to give a warm welcome to our guest speakers from the Institution of Civil Engineers. We've got Kate Harrison, and she's supported by Piran Arms. And also, we're grateful to have Laura Davey, who's a professional hydrologist with WSP. She's joining us, and she's going to share her experience of becoming chartered through ICE. So before we begin, I just want to draw your attention to the items on the right-hand side of the screen. So we suggest you turn off your camera and microphone. So it's good to turn off your microphone now, because our intention is to upload the recording to our YouTube on our BHS YouTube channel. We're going to have the question and answer sessions later. So the Q&A function is live throughout, and you can type your questions in any time, but we don't have a chat function working today. There's also going to be opportunities to raise your hand to ask questions during the question and answer session later on. And just a reminder that we will be recording today's session. Next slide. Thanks, Kate. So today's session is part of our role in the British Hydrological Society, holding regular meetings and events, sharing and promoting hydrology, driving discussion and building collaborations, as well as producing hydrology-related communications. We promote careers and education in hydrology, and we want to support the development of all hydrologists. Next slide, thanks. A run through of the plan for today's webinar. We're going to begin by explaining why we're hosting this Professional Development Month for hydrologists. And after this, we'll hear from our guest speakers, Kate and Piran, who's going to take us through the routes to professional accreditation through the institution and give information about what's involved in your applying. This will be followed by the Q&A session. Then we're going to hear from Laura Davey with reflections on becoming chartered as a hydrologist. And then there's an opportunity for further questions for Laura. Finally, we'll do a forward look, next steps, and we'll wrap up. Now I'm going to hand over to Emma.
That's great. Thanks, Joe. And if we could have the next slide, that would be fantastic. Kate, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emma Cross, BHS trustee, and as Joe's already said, chair of the Education and Careers Subcommittee. So I work as a water resources hydrologist in the Environment Agency, and I achieved my charterships over 10 years ago now. So why a professional development month? Well, this is something new for our society, and one of its key aims is to explain why chartership matters, what it can offer you as a hydrologist. We also want to use it as an opportunity to outline the different routes to chartership, so you can begin thinking about what pathway might suit you. And as a society, we're committed to strengthening our connections with the professional bodies that award charterships. So it's fantastic to be working with the Institution of Civil Engineers, ICE, alongside the Royal Meteorological Society, C.Env, and the Royal Geographical Society. And finally, we want to support you in taking your next steps with your professional development. Next slide. So through past work, BHS has identified 6 chartered pathways for hydrologists. These are Chartered Engineer, C.Eng, Chartered Environmentalist, C.Env, Chartered Scientist, C.Sci, Chartered Meteorologist, C.Met, Chartered Geographer, C.Geog, and Chartered Water and Environmental Manager, C.Wem. So throughout this month, we've been exploring these routes with the awarding bodies. And today's focus is, of course, on Chartered Engineer, awarded by the Institution of Civil Engineers. And they'll also be touching on C.Env today. So you might notice that one title is missing, Chartered Hydrologist. BHS has explored this in the past, but we found it was not possible. And this is because to grant a chartered title, an institution must hold a royal charter from the Privy Council, which is a government office. So that's the setting of our scene. So if we could move forwards, Kate, thank you. So it's now time for us to hear from Kate. So before I welcome Kate, just a reminder, there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of Kate's talk. So please do type your questions into the Q&A function, and you can post anonymously. And again, once again, there'll be an opportunity to raise your hand too when we do our Q&A. So without further ado, welcome, Kate. Thank you so much for being here today, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks also to Joe as well for the introduction. And thanks to the BHS for hosting ICE. We're really pleased to be able to support Professional Development Month. Obviously, part of the ICE's rich history is that we were set up by engineers for engineers. In 1818, a group of young professionals who are seeking to help each other with their professional development. So it's very much at the core of ICE's belief system and our purpose that we will support engineers and people that apply engineering principles in their roles to professionally develop and grow over their careers. So this is our beautiful headquarters, 1 Great George Street. So you might be able to see Houses of Parliament, Elizabeth Tower in the background there, right in the centre of Westminster, where our members can help to influence policymakers and decision makers of the day. So the current government on infrastructure policy, climate change policy. So we can, really be the home for civil engineering, the home for infrastructure, and inform those decision makers at the heart of Westminster. So I'm a membership development officer, as is Piran. We both work in the London and South East part of the team, but we are part of a much wider membership recruitment team in ICE. So Piran and I, we both happen to be professionally qualified engineers who've worked in industry, and quite a lot of our colleagues are as well. But wherever you're based in the UK or around the world, there'll be a colleague who's assigned to look after membership recruitment in that part of the world and to provide advice and guidance. So similar to the presentation I'm delivering today, but they can give much more tailored and specific advice to you, because as we come on to the presentation, you'll see that there are quite a few different variables involved in finding your route to ICE membership. So Piran might be able to share some links in the chat, but you can sometimes identify who your contact might be from the ICE website using the ICE Near You pages. If you are really struggling to find out who that is, if you let us know where you're working and which company you're working for at membership@ice.org.uk, we'll be able to connect you with the right person. So in terms of what might differentiate the ICE to other professional engineering institutions, and we are an engineering institution, and I appreciate that you might be hydrologists on the call, is that we are a really broad membership base. So we have all types of engineers, civil engineers applying civil engineering principles and infrastructure engineers applying alternative engineering principles employed throughout industry. So in structures, in highways, in energy infrastructure, transport infrastructure. We really are a very broad membership base, and particularly since we've started to qualify infrastructure engineers, which I'll explain a bit more about. You know, if you are applying engineering principles in your role and you can meet the other membership requirements for ICE, you would be welcome here. It's just about identifying your route and working towards that professional qualification with us. So on the screen are the different membership grades that we have. I'll talk through the professional qualifications that we offer as well. So all of our members and most of our fellows will hold one of these professional qualifications on the right-hand side of the slide. So they will hold an Engineering Council qualification of EngTech, iEng or C.Env, and they will either hold that in a civil engineering discipline or what we at ICE called an infrastructure engineering discipline. And how we define infrastructure engineering is quite specific, so I'll explain a bit more about that as well. And then we have associate members who might be other engineering professionals or other infrastructure professionals that seek to join ICE at a knowledge level, so not in a professional qualification sense, but joining ICE's community and sharing some of the benefits of our members. Graduate members and student members who are aspiring towards one of those professional qualifications on the right-hand side. And then we have non-members that join ICE as well, so they could be people working in learning and development capacities that are supporting engineers perhaps on their journey to professional qualification with ICE. In addition, ICE does offer the C.Env qualification through the Society for the Environment, but we only offer that to our professionally qualified members. So you would generally have to be professionally qualified at EngTech, iEng or C.Env before you could apply for C.Env via ICE. So you would still need to be working in an engineering role to pursue in C.Env with ICE. We are looking at potentially having a combined C.Env professional review. So at the moment you have to go through two separate processes. First qualify as C.Env and then pursue a qualification as C.Env. We're hoping later this year we'll have a more streamlined option for people that might want to seek out both professional qualifications of C.Env and C.Env at the same time. So definitely a kind of watch this space situation with that, or speak to your membership development officer if that's something that you would like to pursue. Other than our professional qualifications, then there might be alternative membership grades that are suitable for you. So if you think that perhaps your experience doesn't fully align with our membership requirements, or you think that you've made a kind of outstanding contribution to the profession that would enable you to demonstrate one of ICE's fellowship attributes, then you could consider applying for AMICE, Associate Membership of ICE, or Fellowship of ICE if you're able to demonstrate those fellowship attributes as well. So they are alternatives to our professional qualifications. With fellowship, you can pursue that alongside C.Env, iEng or EngTech, or you can do it in its own right. So you can apply for fellowship without that Engineering Council qualification as well. So that provides a bit of flexibility for people who might have come from different backgrounds outside of the engineering side. So what's important with ICE's professional qualifications? So because we are governed by Engineering Council UK in terms of awarding the EngTech, the iEng and the C.Env, you do need to demonstrate that you have an engineering academic eligibility. So I will talk through that, and I'll talk through the requirements for the different membership grades. You obviously also need to demonstrate the right professional competence for our membership requirements. So you need to have worked in roles which allow you to demonstrate all of the IC's requirements. And as a hydrologist, there might be some of those requirements that are easier for you to demonstrate. So you might have to think about whether the roles that you've been in industry are going to fit the requirements for membership, or whether you might have development opportunities that would help you to meet all of those requirements as well. Most of our routes suggest that you should have a mentor in place. Some of them it's more formalised for, and some of them it's optional. And certainly for all professional reviews, all professional interviews at the end of the process, you need to have industry sponsors who are professionally qualified at the grade you're applying or higher. So that's really important as well. So identifying who those sponsors might be early on in the process is important, so you can build relationships with them and they're in a position to sponsor you when you get to your professional review as well. So just in terms of whether you might qualify as a civil or an infrastructure engineer, the routes to professional qualification are the same. What's showing on the screen at the moment is what we call our standard route. There are different ways that you complete this standard route, but essentially it means that you sit our standard professional review at the end. So if you can fill up the first two boxes, you can fill up the academic requirements for your target grade, and you can fill up the IPD or the work experience and competence in the professional setting for the IPD stage, then you can apply to our standard professional review. So there are some benefits to being on that route if you can get onto it, in that you have a much more kind of straightforward and balanced professional review in respect of IC's attributes. We also have recognition routes. So this would be where you hold an alternative engineering professional qualification, perhaps with an engineering council organisation, or from a global engineering institution, so that those are set out on our website as well. And then finally, if you are unable to meet the academic requirements for your target grade, or you can't take steps to kind of make up for any shortfall in those academic requirements, then everyone is welcome to apply by technical report route. So technical report route would essentially cover stages 1, 2 and 3 above in one process, and that process is, I would certainly say, not necessarily simpler. It's one process, but a process that's definitely worth discussing with a membership development officer before you embark on it, because what IC is looking for is quite specific with technical report route. So, but it does exist for those people that might not have engineering qualifications. So another thing it's worth mentioning then on this standard route is that aspiring members and qualified members need to show that they understand and apply IC's continuing professional development requirements as well. So I'm going to start by having a look at the academic base, because it really is, I suppose, what sets out what your route with ICE might be. So working through those different engineering council qualifications of EngTech, iEng and C.Env, I'll talk through the requirements academically. So for EngTech, it's very useful if you can have something like a BTEC level 3, so that might be something equivalent to an ONC or an HNC or higher. So that would mean that you automatically met the Engineering Council academic base for technician membership. So it's less critical with technician membership that you have that, but it's still very useful and make your professional review a bit more straightforward. For the iEng professional qualification, incorporated engineer qualification, you generally need an accredited bachelor's degree in engineering or have had qualifications assessed as equivalent to that. The exception to that would be if you have an HNC that you started before the year 2000, it would likely be, if it's accredited for iEng. So if you have been in industry for a while, it might be that your HNC would be okay for iEng. For chartered engineer, then, you do need to have master's level learning, so that can be either a combination of an accredited bachelor's, so normally a BEng, and an accredited further learning MSc, or an accredited integrated master's, so an MEng degree. But again, if you've been in industry for a while, you might have a bachelor's that you started before the year 2000. That would be okay for C.Env as well. So you might have an engineering degree and you might want to check the accreditation status of that. There are a couple of places you can do that. You can do that on the ICE website. We have a course search tool. You can also check on the Engineering Council UK's course search tool. And Piran might be able to share some links for those in the chat. But these course search tools will tell you whether ICE has accredited it through the JBM, the Joint Board of Moderators, or whether an alternative professional engineering institution has accredited it for EngTech, iEng or C.Env, and ICE will accept any Engineering Council professional engineering institution. And we also recognise the International Professional Engineer Accords as well, so Washington Accord for C.Env and the Sydney Accord for iEng. You can also check with the ICE's qualifications team, so you can email AQP, which stands for Academic Qualifications Panel, at ice.org.uk and provide details of your degree. So critically, when you started it, when you finished it, what degree you were awarded from which institution, and we can provide advice. And potentially we might tell you that you would need to send us some more information and a bit of a admin fee so that we could conduct a bespoke assessment on your qualifications. So if you have degrees that are not strictly engineering, or they might be from overseas, you might need an academic assessment to just check your equivalence to those accredited programs. If you don't quite meet the academic base requirements for your target grade, then there are 3 further learning options that you can follow to uplift your academic base. So you can obviously consider further study, so returning to university. If, for example, you had a bachelor's degree and you might be considering studying a master's degree, then our qualifications team can provide advice on how that particular master's you're thinking of studying would impact your academic base. If you have almost got the academic base you require, so you might have a bachelor's but you're seeking chartership, or you might have an HNC and you're seeking incorporated level, then you can use experiential learning to demonstrate how you've gained master's level learning on the job. So that would be a 2,000 word submission to the ICE, setting out how the experience you've gained in the workplace met the requirements of our academic base, and that could be assessed and we could uplift your academic base by a level, essentially. So for an agency up to iEng, or for a bachelor's up to C.Env. There's also a further learning exam. Worth speaking to a membership development officer before embarking on that, because it does involve learning a syllabus and passing an exam which lasts for about 6 hours. So it might be that experiential learning is a better option. So do speak to a membership development officer about that. But if you like exams, that's an option as well if you have a BEng. And again, if none of these are going to get you where you need to be, there's always that technical report route that you can fall back on to qualify with ICE if you've got the right experience. So the next part of the process then on the standard route is initial professional development. So this is the stage where we start to consider ICE's member attributes, and it makes sure that you've got the right experience across the breadth of all of these competencies before you are formally signed off on a training scheme or formally granted a pass at career appraisal, so that when you get to stage 3, our professional interview, you're in a good position to demonstrate those attributes and potentially be successful with that final stage. So on the screen are ICE's 7 attributes. So I'll kind of talk through those and what you might need to consider. So we have understanding and application of scientific and engineering principles. So that might be the standards and codes that you're using to do your work. It might be the modelling software that you're using and thinking about the inputs to that. It might be, if you are kind of considering technical approaches. So if you are working on the kind of hydrology side, do you get the opportunity to also think about implementing the findings of that on schemes as well? So you could potentially be doing that or not. The remaining attributes then are around management and leadership, which is about program, resource and quality, commercial, which is budgets and contracts, health and safety, which draws upon legislation, hazard assessment and risk management, sustainability, which is around the 3 pillars of sustainability. So you could define those further by the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and looking at sustainability over the project life cycle as well. Communication with stakeholders and project personnel, as well as managing diversity and inclusion, and then behaving ethically and abiding with ICE's code of conduct, as well as undertaking our CPD. So you need to think carefully about the facets of your professional experience and how it really leans into the ICE's attributes. So you might have suitable scientific engineering input, and you might be analysing complex hydrological systems, making recommendations and feeding into technical specifications which engineers are using to develop infrastructure and interventions and schemes. But what you might need to consider is to what degree you're able to demonstrate the other attributes, particularly if you're aiming for I-Eng or C.Eng. So if you don't have a responsibility already, is it something that you could work towards? Could you build it into your professional goals? Could you set some objectives and seek out some new opportunities? Do you have that commercial involvement? Are you programming resources, managing budgets, and fully understanding the commercial appointments at play in your projects? At the C.Eng level, can you justify that you are managing significant budgets, that you can make commercial judgments in matters of contracts or similar, if you were in a position to do so? And do you think about how any recommendations you make impact health, safety and welfare for the general public, or for those that might be implementing or operating any infrastructure arising as a result of your technical recommendations? Can you link it to legislation? For example, would you consider yourself a designer under the C.Env regulations 2015? And can you demonstrate that you've eliminated hazards and reduced risks through your design? You might be a client, and you might be responsible for making sure a health and safety file is properly established and available for people that need to refer to it in the future. Sustainability might be a bit easier for you. You can probably lean into those 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals and pick out several of those that you are impacting, perhaps clean water and sanitation, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, life on land. So moving on then, conscious of time. ICE has the option to qualify as a civil engineer or an infrastructure engineer. The difference there would be the type of engineering principles you are applying. So civil engineers apply civil engineering principles, and we would think of these as being structures, hydraulics, geotechnics, and civil engineering materials. And essentially, infrastructure engineers apply alternative engineering principles. So the areas that we're seeing real interest in for infrastructure engineers are digital and environmental, and both of those feel like they could lean into hydrology as well. So perhaps you really understand the architecture behind a hydrological model, and you might be able to say that your technical is more digital than civil. You might prefer to be talking about the AI that you might be using to model systems in hydrology, or you might prefer to talk about environmental engineering and systems, in which case you could consider applying for infrastructure qualifications with ICE instead. So you can attend an attributes webinar. We have one on the 4th of March, which Piran might be able to share a link for, and hear more about all of the ICE's attributes, more detail on those, and think about how they align with your experience and whether you're able to demonstrate them or to seek out professional development such that you could in the future. So a word on technicians then. Technicians can apply without formal academics. They can have their academics assessed at their professional review. They don't have to complete initial professional development as a formal stage, but they obviously need to have the right experience to demonstrate in their professional interview that they meet all of the ICE's technician requirements. So if you think that you meet the technician attributes, you could apply directly for professional review regardless of your academic qualifications, and perhaps you might have a few more technical questions in your professional review if you didn't have a BTEC level 3 or an HNC in engineering. So for iEng and C.Env, you do have to go through a specific IPD completion stage, and there are some different ways to do that. You can either be in the process of gaining more experience, so still working towards having all the required competencies and experience you need to meet ICE's attributes, in which case you could do a training scheme at an approved employer or mentor supported training if you don't happen to work at an ICE approved employer. And then you might have all the experience already that you need to demonstrate ICE's attributes, in which case you could do the career appraisal option instead. So a training scheme is for anyone who has the right academic base, needs more practical industry experience, and needs to get that formal IPD completion before they apply for an ICE professional review. And you would keep some typical records on a training scheme. So you would keep evidence of how you are gaining industry experience and how that meets the ICE's attributes, either in some project-based development reports or as kind of standalone snapshots of how your experience meets ICE's attributes. That would be assessed by a supervising civil engineer in an approved employer or an ICE approved mentor. And that person would also undertake annual appraisals with you, help you set some targets for the year ahead. Everyone keeps records slightly differently, and it is very flexible in terms of what ICE will accept as records. So no combination of supervising civil engineer and trainee are necessarily going to be doing the same thing. It's more about satisfying that supervising civil engineer or mentor that you are meeting the requirements of the attributes at your target level and having them assessed and signed off. And then you also do ICE CPD requirements as well. So as you work through the attributes, you sign off different levels of competence and essentially aiming for ability at your target level. So as you gain experience, you will first of all meet the iEng requirements, and then there are some additional attribute requirements for chartership. So in the areas of leadership, or perhaps kind of innovative and technical solutions for attribute 1. So you will be able to see as you progress through a training scheme how you are working towards those ability levels and achieving the attributes. Career appraisals then are for those who have already got that industry experience that they need. So they need to complete IPD as a formal stage. They're doing that outside of an ICE training scheme. So they will be sending a submission into the ICE to be assessed for that IPD stage. And the way that ICE has set up the career appraisal is such that it is a draft professional review report that you send to ICE. So you send a report on 1 to 2 recent projects, which between them demonstrate all of the ICE's attributes in around 5,000 words, supported with some appendices, and that gets assessed by ICE, signed off as a formal IPD stage, so you can take that report forward to your professional interview with ICE. So I mentioned CPD as well. I'm going to really talk about CPD very quickly because I'm conscious that I'm running out of time. But prospective members need to demonstrate they can follow ICE CPD requirements. And on that, you can find videos on the ICE website, some CPD guidance, and ICE's also recently introduced some mandatory CPD themes for its members to consider when planning and undertaking their CPD. So there are 2 pro formas our members interact with. Once a year, they set a set of CPD objectives called a development action plan. And then throughout the year, they record all of the professional development that they do. So training courses, on-the-job learning, and professional commitment activities. And in applying for a career appraisal or signing off a training scheme, you would need 3 years of those records. Absolutely creating them retrospectively as possible, and your membership development officer can advise on that. Professional review then, final stage. This is an interview by 2 existing members who are trained professional reviewers, and they are essentially checking that on the day of your interview you can demonstrate the ICE's attributes at your target grade. They will have received a report from you, so that career appraisal report, everybody would do that as part of their professional review submission at the end, even if they've been on a training scheme, and that goes to your reviewers, and they have read that, and you have the opportunity to present to to them on that project and answer their questions in an interview, either in person or on Teams. Plenty of people kind of pass through the grades. So you might be a technician member before an iEng member, or an iEng member before a C.Env member. There is a direct link between iEng and C.Env in that if you were already an incorporated engineer when you sit our chartered review, you only have to show the difference between the two grades. So that's an option as well, kind of breaking it down into stages. So I am coming to the end of my slides. I'll just wrap up quickly. So in summary, we've covered the standard route in a bit more detail in this session, but there are alternative options. So you might have an alternative qualification we'd recognise. You might consider joining ICE in a knowledge grade rather than as a professional qualification, so as an associate member or a fellow in your own right without pursuing Engineering Council. And if you are professionally qualified with ICE with an Engineering Council qualification, you can look at adding on C.Env to that as well, if you're able to demonstrate the attributes or the competencies of a chartered environmentalist. Where can you find further guidance? So obviously, if you know ICE members, they would be happy to help. It's written into our professional code of conduct that you should assist others with their CPD. So do reach out to other ICE members, reach out to your membership development officer. We can help with emails. We can have meetings with you in teams that we call membership surgeries. If there's a few people interested in ICE membership where you work, we can come and see you or do something online for you collectively as well. And then I'll ask Piran if you can share some links to membership guidance and webinars in the chat as well. And, you know, email membership@ice.org.uk and we'll put you in touch with the right person. So hopefully that was a bit of an overview, and we're on track to move on to the Q&As, Emma.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you. Wonderful. Very informative. Thank you. So now is an opportunity to ask questions. So the good news, Kate, is that we do have some questions in the Q&A chat, but please do feel free to continue to add to those questions while we're kind of working our way through this Q&A chat. And there'll also be an opportunity to raise your hand to ask a live question. So thanks again, Kate. So I'm going to start with the first question. So the question is, regarding the academic base, are degrees obtained abroad accepted, of course, with a certified translation?
Yes, absolutely. It might be that your degree has a kind of international recognition associated with it, or it might be that ICE would require you to send a transcript and the modules you've studied for us to do an assessment. But we can advise, so membership development officers might be able to advise, or the qualifications team can advise as well on that. So absolutely worth having it assessed.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Kate. The next question is, how long does it typically take to achieve C.Env? What's the timeline like?
So it differs for everybody. There's no kind of fixed timeline. It depends on the roles you've had in industry and the opportunities you've had to meet all of those attributes. But you know, typically it might take people around 3 to 4 years to get the incorporated attributes signed off and potentially go for their iEng professional review, and probably 4, 5, 6 years for the chartered professional review, probably closer to the 5, 6 years for most people. But that is all subject to having the right roles and the right opportunities and experience.
Great stuff. So just to ask a bit of a segue question, is there kind of a minimum number of years experience that's required by the awarding council?
So not specifically, but you do need to have 3 years of CPD records, but you can absolutely have CPD records that kind of span time you were in education as well. So that would be okay.
Great, fantastic, wonderful. So the next question is, so you talked about mentors, Kate. Do you have a list of available mentors? So if somebody's on the search for a mentor, how would they go about that? Thanks.
So if you were to join ICE as a student member or a graduate member, or indeed you were a qualified member, so you might be a technician member kind of working towards iEng, then we have something called Mentor Match, which is an online system where you can set up a profile for yourself, setting out what you need a mentor for, and then ICE members who have extra capacity to mentor can link up with you and offer their support. As well as that, membership development officers tend to know people in their areas that might be acting as mentors, so it's always worth having a chat with us as well, and we can help with that.
Great, wonderful. So we're halfway through the questions that have been asked in the Q&A chat. So I'm just going to give anybody the opportunity to raise their hand at this point and ask a live question. So if you'd like to do so, please do raise your hand and we'll come over to you.
Piran did mention to me in on the side that you couldn't post any links in the chat, could you, Piran? Because it wasn't available. So
oh no, okay, cool. No worries, Piran. So what you can do is just post them in the Q&A. That's perfect. Okay, that's what we're doing with our links a bit later. Post them in the Q&A.
Okay,
so
perfect.
Does that help?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Great, wonderful, fantastic. Okay, well, we've got a few more posts that have come in while I've been talking just there. So let me just catch up with where we got to. So a question around the professional review. Are you able just to say a little bit more about it, Kate? Thanks.
Yes. So the professional review then, hopefully if you've passed an initial professional development stage, you're in a great position to be successful at your professional review. So I'm a professional reviewer for ICE, and I've found that the professional reviewing community are really supportive, really engaged with professional development. Generally kind of mid-career, there's a few people that are a bit further along in their careers, but really passionate about qualifying new members of ICE. So they will spend a lot of time preparing. Sometimes I feel, am I more nervous than the candidate when I'm reviewing someone? But it should feel like a professional discussion. So it's an opportunity for you to kind of showcase a project or a couple of projects you've worked on recently, and use those to convince your reviewers that you've met all of the attributes. And if you've done a good job of writing your report and kind of setting out your case, hopefully it should be quite a kind of rewarding experience, and feel much more like three professionals talking than anything too intimidating.
Great, that's lovely, and that's what we want to hear as well about a review. It's a review, not an interview, so that's really fantastic. Thanks, Kate. Now we've got a similar kind of question come from two individuals, so I'm going to kind of combine them. So the question is, could chartership be considered with an academic work experience? And the person has put open close brackets, PhD and postdoc, but limited in industry experience. So that's the first question. And then somebody else has just asked, is it possible for people in academia to become C.Env? So, okay.
Yeah. So in our professional review guidance document, you can find our attributes in Appendix A, and it does set out in a bit of a preamble to the attributes how, although all members have to demonstrate all of the attributes, the kind of depth and extent of them will differ depending on their roles. So very much for academics, we understand that is probably a key part of our professional review guidance. Whilst you do have to demonstrate all the attributes, you're obviously going to be demonstrating things like health and safety and commercial in different ways to a practicing contractor, for example, or a consultant. So you would have to find evidence to present. So it might be around the kind of funding of your projects or funding of degree programs, and kind of keeping budgets in relation to that, and any kind of commercial agreements that you've made in relation to that funding. And health and safety is sometimes more around kind of health and safety of research assistants in the lab and students in that you might be teaching as well. So it is different. You have to demonstrate them all. What we do is we do have kind of specific courses for those who work in academia who might be seeking to prepare a career appraisal. So if you think you would like to explore that, contact membership@ice.org.uk and ask about those academic career appraisal courses, and we'll send you the details of the next one.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, Kate. That's really helpful and supportive. Thank you. So we pretty much come to time for the Q&A now. There is one outstanding question and hopefully we'll be able to pick that up a bit later. But I think it's now time to move forward. So Joe, if I could hand back to you, that would be fantastic.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you. And thanks, Kate. It's now time to introduce our next speaker. So I'd like to welcome Laura Davey, who's here to share us her experience of becoming chartered with ICE. So putting the learning of just what we've heard from Kate into practice. Laura, if I can pass to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Joe. Kate, if you could move on to my first slide. So I just thought I'd start off with just kind of giving you a bit of an intro into sort of me and my journey with the ICE. So I graduated back in 2015 with an MEng in civil engineering. So as Kate has sort of explained, it made sense for me to then follow the sort of traditional path towards C.Env status. So on starting my first job, I signed up to an ICE training agreement. And I got this signed off after it was roughly about 5 years of working, progressing towards the chartered review in 2021. So I think it's about the same kind of average kind of time that people do to get to chartership. So I'm now working as a principal engineer at WSP in the hydrology and modelling team. And I'm also a supervising civil engineer as well. I found there weren't many because I work primarily within hydrology and modelling, there weren't that many people chartered with the ICE, so it was really important to provide those that are working towards it with enough mentors within our team. And I found that also to be a really rewarding experience, helping others to go through the sort of training agreement and chartership processes. So if you can go next slide, please, Kate. So my sort of early career was a very broad range of topics. As sort of shown on this slide, hydrology was kind of just part of my initial development. I found in some ways across this, it really helped in getting a sort of broad range of topics, making it much easier to cover all the attributes and show a real sort of breadth of my knowledge. However, I found sort of there was points with less repetition of the same thing. It makes it harder to kind of get sign off at those sort of higher ability levels where you're expected to do a lot more work independently with sort of minimal direction. So there are sort of 3 levels to sign off within that IPD system. You're starting off with sort of knowledge and then experience and then ability. And so I found that it was really easy to sign off the sort of experience level because I had such a broad range, but the ability level sort of took me a little bit longer. You can go next slide, please, Kate. So I just sort of wanted to put in some of the kind of hydrology projects that I used within my chartership evidence. So I find when people think of a civil engineer, they generally think of the sort of typical disciplines like highways and bridges and tunnelling, and very rarely think of things like hydrology. So I think it's really important for us to be having these kind of sessions to really build this in, because hydrology is a part of engineering. So there are a range of different sort of hydrology techniques that I used to sign off some of the different attributes. So I mainly work in sort of hydrology for the benefit of modelling or drainage strategies. So I've done a combination of sort of low flow hydrology, doing plot scale equations in RefH2, a bit of PMF for maximal flood, and then with quite a lot of my work has been sort of comparing sort of RefH2 and statistical analysis projects for generating modelling peak flows and hydrographs. So this has really used a sort of broad range of sort of different parts, from sort of catchment digitisation to updating catchment descriptors using various different FEH guidance on there, and then using various different softwares as well, with sort of WinFAP and RefH2, and using Flood Modeler Pro as well for RefH1. Go on to the next slide, please. So from my experience, from both sort of undertaking chartered review and as my work as a supervising engineer, I've kind of put together a list of a few different examples that I think can help sign off some of the different attributes. So some of them I found much easier to provide evidence for from a hydrology basis. So starting with sort of attribute 1 on the sort of understanding and practical application of engineering is you can use a lot of like sort of the FEH guidance to show the sort of different engineering theories behind things. You can talk a lot about using technology to assist the application through using softwares like WinFAP and RefH2. You can also talk about solving problems through sound theoretical approaches from kind of comparing different FEH methods, and there's a lot of sort of decisions that we make throughout everything that we do, and that can all be incorporated onto here, as well as if you sort of create any templates for hydrology. It's a great way of sort of introducing new technology, new ways of doing things within your companies or your academia ways of things. One of the sections in attribute 1 that I struggled with the most with hydrology was around there was design development of engineering solutions. So I found if I didn't have hydrology that led to something else, it was harder to kind of get all of the sort of sub attributes to be included. Moving on to some of the other attributes. So I think any of the ones around management and leadership, commercial ability, communication and professional commitment, these can all very much be done with any type of project, whether it's hydrology or anything else. I think like it's just finding a project for you that you can use as an example to show that you can manage people and can lead people and can sort of understand all the sort of commercial aspects of it. Next slide, please, Kate. So I think the attribute that I found it hardest to sign off with just sort of hydrology type projects was the health and safety one, because I found a lot of the projects never really led so much to me doing the risk review. So it was fine from a sort of knowledge and experience kind of level, because I was aware of the whole projects and what else was going on in the projects. But for me to show that I could tick off some of the health and safety attributes, I found that much harder without having done the sort of follow-on steps from the hydrology. So some of the sort of modelling side of things and options development and things around that. And then the last one that I'll just mention is the sustainable development one. I think any of us that work in the water industry, pretty much everything we do is all around sustainability in some form or other. And I think with the UN sustainability goals, I know Kate mentioned a few earlier, but some of the ones that I've found really linked to what I do in hydrology around the sort of sustainable cities, climate action, and then life below water. So all about making sure that we're sort of being sustainable with our oceans and rivers and things like that. So I'll just sort of finally just say that I didn't end up using hydrology projects for my chartered review, but that was mainly because I had a much more recent sort of modelling and design of flood alleviation options project that I found just ticked off more of the attributes easier. But I think as you can talk about multiple projects throughout your final report submission as well, I ended up talking about 3 different subjects just so that I could really cover all of those different attributes. And you can always you can start with a hydrology project and then maybe have another project that sort of fills in some of the gaps of things that you might be missing. From my opinion, if you're like sort of purely a hydrologist, then ICE may not be the best institution for you to get chartered with. However, I think if you do hydrology alongside other sort of specialists and other elements, then it's definitely more than enough to help you sign off your training agreement and go through to chartered review. Great, thanks very much. And I'll pass back to Joe, I think.
Thank you so much, Laura. That's really useful lessons that I think a lot of hydrologists can apply. It obviously started with your academic background, but you were able to find your way to become chartered as a core hydrologist. I don't think we've got any questions relating directly to any extra questions, have I? You haven't seen any, have you, Emma?
No, I haven't.
No.
There's just
No.
one outstanding question, Joe, and that I'm just conscious of time as well. But it just says, just asking around kind of becoming a member of BHS. They filled out the form on the BHS website some time back, but have not received any response. So I don't know whether you could just follow that one up just briefly. Thanks.
Yeah, I can. If you get in touch with us through the BHS website, to the secretary there, the bhs@ice.org.uk, I think it is, and or with me, BHS President at outlook.com. I'll put that in the chat, in the Q&A afterwards. Then I can follow up if you send me your details. I can follow that up. It's recognised that we have had some problems up to now, and they are getting better. But I'm sorry, there is a backlog. But if you give me your details, I can follow it up individually. So thanks for that. That was a brilliant outline. Thanks, Laura, of how core hydrologists can undertake what's needed for becoming members of the ICE, and it's really useful to us because the Hydrological Society is under the umbrella of the Civil Engineers. We are a specialist knowledge society, and we base our meetings from 1 Great George Street, which we're grateful to be able to do. And it's really good to know that hydrologists who graduate with an MEng can be put on a program to achieve their chartership. I say thanks once again, Laura. I think time is pressing against us, so we'd better move on. With the benefits of chartership is our next slide. So we're nearly at the end. So going back to the start of today's webinar, we explained one of our key goals is to explain the benefits of chartership. So we've shown this through the sharing of information today, but this slide gives a recap on some of examples of benefits from the seeking of chartership and becoming chartered. So there's professional recognition, personal development, career development, enhanced opportunities for wider networking, increasing the fulfillment and motivating in your current role, and definitely adding personal credibility in your role. I'll now hand back to Emma.
That's great. Thanks so much, Joe. So fantastic. So moving on to the next steps, we'd really like you to reflect on what you've learned today and what your route to chartership might be. We'd like to know how you found today and how we might be able to support you in the future. So through a follow-up survey. So the link should be posted very shortly in the Q&A. We do plan to share the materials from our Professional Development Month, including uploading this recording onto YouTube. So please do keep an eye out on our website. And if you're not already, then do consider becoming a member of BHS and of course ICE as well. Again, links will be in the Q&A. Next slide, please, Kate. So we regroup next Wednesday for our 4th and final webinar with the Royal Geographical Society. So if you've not already registered, then again, you should find links in the Q&A. We've also included other events. So on the 17th of June, we are a co-partner for the Drought in the UK conference. So please keep an eye out on our website. And then from the 2nd to the 4th of September is our BHS 16th National Hydrology Symposium at the University of Leeds. It's entitled Reimagining Hydrology for a Changing World. We're open for abstracts, for posters and presentations. Closing date is Friday the 3rd of April. And just to say, we open for registration for the symposium on the 2nd of March. So more details can be found in the Q&A. And then moving forwards, we thought we'd leave you with an inspirational quotation. And this one comes from Chris Lansborough. So let me read it out. So chartered engineer status signifies not only a mark of excellence, but a mark of trust, opening doors to advanced roles, challenging projects and opportunities to influence the future of infrastructure and its engineers. What a great quote. Fantastic. And we move on to the final slide and over to Joe. Thanks, Joe.
It just leaves to me to say thank you for joining us today. I want to thank our guest speakers, Kate and Laura and Piran, and thank you also very much to Emma and to Alex Scott and Amber at JBA, who've been involved in organising and helping with today's event. So JBA Group and Trust have used their teams for us today, and we say thanks for that and for the behind the scenes help with organising today. So just please stay connected with us. We hope you enjoy this event, and we hope that you might join us for our last event of the Professional Development Month. And I just finally say to remind you to give us feedback and stay in touch. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.